With all the intense heat this summer, I am dreaming of fall, and one of the most fun parts about fall is Halloween. Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel, and in today's video, I am sharing the Pretty Pink Posh latest release that is all about Halloween. This release includes stamps, dies, stencils, foil plates, and embellishments. And as usual for Pretty Pink Posh, they are all the cutest and prettiest Halloween supplies you could ever find. I want to jump right into the card making because I have a ton of cards to share with you today. So I'll just let you know what those new products are that I'm using as we go through the card making. First up, this is the layering Argyle stencils. There's 3 stencils, diamonds, and then 2 different diagonal lines going in different directions. I love Argyle. I love that it is coming back again, and so I wanted to use it for this first card. I have an A2 piece of white cardstock on my waffle flower grip mat, and then I have the first stencil right on top. I'm working with Distress Oxide ink. My first color will be Saltwater Taffy. I am going for non-traditional Halloween colors, lots of light colors, some pinks, some light oranges, and a bright green, light green. So I think that Halloween with non-traditional colors is so much fun. It is similar to me as the Christmas non-traditional colors, and I think it makes creating cards lots of fun. So I have this last color here is the diagonal line that goes in the other direction. Remember when you have thin lines like this to just go in the direction of the open part of the stencil. Don't rub in circles, otherwise you're just going to pull it up. So once I have my Argyle background, I am ready to use the stitched pumpkin dies to create some elements on my cards. Now these dies can be used with little jack-o'-lantern faces, but for this card I kept them just plain pumpkins with the stitched lines. And I have coordinating ink to cardstock so that I can ink on the edges of these pumpkins to give them a little bit more oomph. They're super cute on their own though. You don't need to add anything else. They're just the cutest shape of pumpkins, and I love that you get 3 different sizes. You also get a die that cuts out a stem for each of these sized pumpkins, as well as a couple of leaves and a couple of those little vines that you find on the top of the pumpkin as well. So all of these are getting a little bit of ink on the edges, and where I don't have an exact match, I use something sort of similar, like this Distress Oxide gathered twigs, and I'll just use a tiny shader brush to add that little bit of extra something on the edge of those inked die cuts. Now I have a little bit of liquid adhesive at the bottom of those stems. You can see where there's kind of a rectangular aspect to the stem. That's what gets tucked behind the pumpkin. So it makes it, whoops, pulled that one out a little too hard, wasn't try yet, but that's what makes it so easy to line these up. You can tell exactly where you're supposed to cover up on the stem. As for the leaves, you can just kind of have fun and put whatever you think looks cute and tuck some behind the pumpkin, have some coming in front of the pumpkin. Same goes for those vines. You can have them coming from behind the pumpkin. I love that they have the little squirrely lines to them. I just think they make such a nice touch. This is the Sentiment Strips Halloween stamps. There's a whole bunch of different sentiments, and this is the Sentiment Strips dies. These can be used with any small sentiments or long sentiments. You can see that they have flags, they have rectangles, stitched rectangles, and scallop with stitching, so lots of different options. I stamped Hey Pumpkin, and I am cutting off the scalloped edge of the white Hey Pumpkin so it'll fit right on top of a coral or peach look of the Hey Pumpkin stitched sentiment dies. Now I have my pumpkins all popped up in front of each other so that you get lots of depth to those pumpkins, and then the sentiment right on top. I adore these colors for Halloween. This is the layered spiderweb stencils. This is 2 stencils. The first one is the webs and the second one is the spiders. So I'll start this with Distress Oxide ink in Lost Shadow. I wanted those webs to be lighter because I want the spiders to be black. So I didn't want black and black, so I thought a really nice light gray to make a subtle background would be really pretty, and I do like the way that that came out. So now for the spiders, I have Distress Oxide in Black Soot, and they just are the cutest little things on their webs. Check out how adorable and how easy it is to make these backgrounds with layering stencils. I decided I wanted to add a little something special to the webs. So I have some Simon Hurley Lunar Paste in a silver color, and I'm not adding it to all the webs in all the places, but just here and there as little accents to the web. So you know how when you see a spider web in the light with maybe some dew glistening on it, not the whole web shows up, but just little bits of it. So this is what I thought I was trying to create here, and I do like that metallic look. This is the Halloween Cupcakes stamps and dies. You can get the 6 cupcake stamps and you can get dies to cut each of them out. So I decided to color in a couple of these. I have them stamped in alcohol-friendly ink on alcohol-friendly cardstock, and I'm using Ohuhu markers to color them in. So since I did non-traditional colors for the last card, I thought it'd be fun to do some more traditional Halloween colors for the second card. So I have kind of a crazy green. You could see that those 2 greens didn't really look like they were going to blend, but once you go at them a little bit, they blended really cool, and I like the way that they turned out. And then some purples for the cupcake wrapper, a little bit of gray for the spider getting darker on the legs, just so that you can still see the face. If we colored it in all black, obviously the stamped lines would disappear. So for the second cupcake, I'm going to kind of flip. I'm going to do purple on the top, and then I had green and orange on the bottom. This is the Halloween signs, stamps, and dies. I love these Halloween signs. Different little characters and signs, and those sentiments fit on the signs. You can stamp them on there. So again, I stamped them in alcohol-friendly ink on alcohol-friendly cardstock, and I am coloring in the sign in similar purples that I used on those cupcakes. I figured since we have the spider web background, I have a cupcake with a spider and a little web sign with a spider, and then to add in a third element, I have those bats. So that's how I combined these elements together from different stamp sets. And there are many options. There's ghosts, there's pumpkins, on both of these stamp sets. So they really work so well together, and they're all super cute and adorable. So really you could use them on a card all together. I stamped Spooky Wishes on the sign in white pigment ink and then covered it up with some white embossing powder and then heat set that so it would really stand out from the back of the sign. And then I used some washi tape to adhere down the dies to the paper and then cut them all out. I have a wonky square, it's like a stitched square for the center of the card, and then I'll layer all my die cut colored elements on top. This is the Hocus Pocus clay confetti. You can see there are some sprinkles in there, so I decided to not just go with the sprinkles that I had colored in on the cupcake. I put a little dot of liquid adhesive and I picked out a couple of purple sprinkles. This is the spooky glass shaker beads. You can use them as embellishments too. But be careful, they will go all over if you don't put them in a tray. So use those little triangle trays to hold them in place while you're working with them. Again, I picked out the purples and used a little bit of liquid glue and an embellishment pickup tool to add them to the purple icing of that cupcake. This is the layered candy treats stencil. So now let's go back to non-traditional colors. So I have the stencil on top of an A2 piece of white cardstock on my waffle flower grip mat, and I'm using Distress Oxide ink. Now the great thing about having these layered stencils is that you can create a colorful background really easily, but if you have smaller shader brushes like this, you can make each stencil multicolored. So I have 2 different color of pinks for the first stencil, and now I'm using a little bit of Distress Oxide in Squeezed Lemonade and then some saltwater taffy for those lollipops. They're so cute, and you can start to see the candies come together as you go. What's brilliant is even if you don't know where it's going, Pretty Pink Posh does. So they have it all figured out for you. And it looks so cute when it all comes together. I did add a little bit of purple and some orange. I thought I would mix in the pinks to those traditional colors, and it is really starting to look cute. So how about some wilted violet to really get that pop of purple that is fun on Halloween, and a mowed lawn for a darker green, because sometimes that twisted citron almost looks a little too yellowy. So I like to add in the mowed lawn for a real green, and that is a fun candy background. So to add that to a card, I am coloring in a few more of the images that we colored in the last card. So I have the Halloween signs here. You can see that on the pumpkin, the sentiment would go in that left-hand pumpkin that is completely open. There's no lines drawn on it. And I am just doing a little bit of shading and blending just for a little bit of fun, but you can see I'm using that really light orange. I stamped Trick or Treat, which is from the stamp set, and then cut it out with the dies. And I have a wonky rectangle cut out of vellum so that I can have all 3 of my elements kind of centered on the card, and the sentiment is at the top, and it tones down that center of the background but allows it to be fun and bright on the outsides. This is the Mummy Wrap stencil. It's a single stencil, and I wasn't sure what color I wanted to do with this. So I decided to head to Simon Hurley's Solar Paste in Beluga. And white on white, like solar paste on white cardstock, will just add a nice hint of color and some metallic shine. So I liked the way that that ended up, and I decided to use it with the Boo to You stamps and dies. So it's got the pumpkin image that's made up of lots of smaller images. I treated some white cardstock with anti-static powder and then stamped the image in Versamark ink and then poured gold embossing powder on top and then heat set that. So of course you can color in all these little individual images. I've done that with Pretty Pink Posh stamps like this before. I decided to just do some ink blending on this one. So I have, again, the non-traditional colors of Squeezed Lemonade. I have dried marigold, saltwater taffy, a little wild honey all around the outside to kind of piece it all together. And then I cut down that Mummy Wrap background once it was fully dry and placed it on some yellow cardstock. Then I have the gold embossing powder poured on a bunch of the tiny little images that come in the stamp set. They have the additional images outside of the pumpkin. So it's got a sentiment that says Boo to You, then there's a candy corn, a spider web, a star, a ghost, a pumpkin, bat, and I decided to color those in with a hoo-hoo marker. And the die set will cut all of those little images out so you can pop them up around the larger pumpkin. Just so much fun to create with the gold embossing, the ink blending, and the coloring. This is the Halloween Mug Editions dies. If you've seen me create with the Mug Editions before, you know it's one of my favorite things because Pretty Pink Posh originally came out with the mug, and it's called the Winter Mug. It's got a bunch of little things in it as well, but they now have a bunch of different edition sets. This one has things like a tombstone that you can make a shaker, Frankenstein, you can turn it into a cat, there's a pumpkin, there's mummy wrap pieces, and there are little fangs for a little vampire, there's an RIP, and these little images you could cut and use as shaker goodies. So I cut the mug out twice from black and then cut the little tombstone shaker out of the black and then cut the mug out of acetate. Then adhere the mug with the die cut opening to the acetate, and that will make your shaker window. So figuring out which pieces I wanted to use with my mug today, I decided to use the witch's hat, the cauldron bubbles, the broom, the moon, and the star. Adhere down the base, which is the plain black mug, to your cardstock or to your card, and then use some foam around the opening of the window. Pretty Pink Posh has some really fun shaker goodies to choose from. These are the candy corn glass shaker beads. Then there's the Ghostly Friends confetti mix. You can see little ghosts, stars, black and white sprinkles. They're just so cute, those little faces on the ghosts as well. They also have the Halloween candy mix. This is also a confetti, clay confetti. There's so many different colors and pieces in there, and the Hocus Pocus clay confetti. So that's what I'm starting with: Hocus Pocus clay confetti and some candy corn glass beads. Peel off the protective labels on the foam tape and then just place that down over some of those shaker goodies. And then it's time to start decorating. So I added the bubbles to the top of the mug and the drips right underneath it. You can see how perfectly they fit together. I'll have the moon at the top here and the star. The witch's hat has a brim and it also has a buckle. So I cut that out of gold and the little brim out of orange, and I accidentally took that away with my finger because it was still wet. For the broom, I cut it out of craft cardstock, and now I'm using some Distress Oxide ink in Vintage Photo to add a little bit of worn look to that broom. Then you can adhere together the clasp on the straw for the broom and the broomstick behind that broom. So just a couple little pieces and it makes the cutest little broom. I also cut out a spider. I'll put that on the green, and then the broom is like a coffee stirrer that you would put inside the drink. I have those extra bubbles. You can put them right on the bubble die cut, and I have a sentiment from the Sentiments stamp set, and I used one of the dies to cut it out, and it says brewing up some Halloween fun. I'll add some white gel pen details because that's always fun, and it's really easy to add little shine marks to those green bubbles. So you can just do a little, almost like a comma on the bubble, and that will look like a little shine. And then pop up the sentiment right on top, and it is such a fun shaker card to make, and you can make so many different versions of the mug editions. This is the Decorative pumpkin stamps and dies. You can see there's 3 different sizes of pumpkins. There's lines, solids, and then patterns, and there's sentiments that can fit inside the pumpkins as well. There's also jack-o'-lantern faces and stems, and then there's a die set that you can get that cuts out each of the sizes of pumpkins. So when I am working with a stamp set like this and I know I want to create a whole bunch of them together, I will do this. I will stamp on one side of the cardstock and then I'll flip it over and stamp on the other side. This way I get all 3 done in one swoosh, and then I have all 6 done all together. Now, of course, I have to cut them out individually 3 at a time, but the stamping goes a lot quicker if you line them all up like this. And you can put your pattern layers on all at once because there's enough patterns for 2 different pumpkins of each size. Last but not least, I did stamp 3 in a yellow and orange pattern. I created another Argyle background with the stencil set and then cut out all these little pumpkins. And I decided to stamp one of the sentiments from the stamp set that says, "Hey there, pumpkin," right on one of the yellow pumpkins. So I cut down the Argyle to 4 by 5 1/4 and matted it on some yellow cardstock. I put the sentiment pumpkin in the center and then 4 large ones around it. Then I have medium ones, 1 on each side of that center pumpkin, and I'm using 2 smaller pumpkins, 1 next to each of the large on the top and the bottom. So I do end up using a lot of them, and it still stayed kind of neat and clean, which is what I like. So it's a really fun set to play with. This is the Haunted House dies. It's got the large haunted house, which fits on an A2 card, and then a bunch of little ghosts, pumpkin, cat, bats, moon, stars. So I'm adhering a little piece of yellow cardstock to the back of the cat whose eyes are holes. This way it looks like the cat has those glowing yellow eyes. Now for the background, I used some squeezed lemonade in a circle that's going to be kind of the haze of the moon once I blend it all out. So starting from the bottom, I'm using Distress Oxide ink in Villainous Potion and then chipped sapphire in the center, and then I'll use black soot at the top. And I'm really going pretty heavy-handed here. I want this to be completely opaque and not have any white showing through. So you can see here, I'm going around that circle that I created for the back of the moon, and I'm making it a little bit smaller because it was a little too large for the moon that I have that's die cut. And then I'll just gently tap over the moon of the ink blending with that black soot so that it looks like the hazy light from the moon. Then I adhered down the haunted house and I wanted it to stand out more. So I die cut another one in black cardstock and I'll adhere it right down on top. That just adds a little bit of dimension. It's not too much, but it's just enough to make it stand out from the background a little bit. So once that was done and dry, I pop up the moon and check that out. So now it looks like the light and haze from the moon is coming off of that crescent. For the doorway, I decided to cut out two other colors of the house. Three, actually. I cut out yellow, green, and a dark purple. So for the doorway, I will just add some glue to the open space. I ink blended the outside with some black soot and then pop that doorway right into place. So this is just a basic die cut inlay technique where you use different colors of cardstock and pop them in like puzzle pieces into the openings of the house die cut. So for the windows, I ink blend a little bit of black soot all around them and then place them right where they go in those panes of the windows. I also, you can see, have a ghost there, a little pumpkin. I'm just trying to figure out where everything's going to go. For the tiles at the top, I put glue in all the openings, and then I placed the die cut that still had all the pieces stuck together, and I'm using a Spellbinders 2-in-1 to poke it out and place it down. It worked for the majority of them. There was a couple that I had to place by hand, but it really saved me some time. Then I have just a couple more pieces of green because I didn't want just one green door, and I decided to do the same technique with the shutters. Now you can see I had lost a couple of those shutters, and I was not going to look for those tiny little pieces or try and cut out more. So when I poked them all out, the ones that I lost or that didn't get placed exactly right, I figured they looked like broken slats in the shutters, and that was perfect for a haunted house. So there's a reason for everything, right? Or you can make a reason for everything. I added a little bat on top of the moon, a couple of little ghosts popped up on the house, and then I have a bat in the window, the pumpkin in one window, the cat in another window. For the sentiment, I'm going to use the Large Boo shadow dies and foil plates. The great thing about the dies is you can use the die with the shadow, you can use the die alone, or you can use the shadow with the foil plate. So the shadow can cut out either the die or the foiled boo. So I have a black piece of cardstock with some silver sparkle foil on top, and I'm using my Spellbinders Glimmer machine to heat up and attach that foil to that cardstock. And when you peel off that foil, check out that boo. I love Pretty Pink Posh's script. It's so much fun. So I'll hold the shadow die in place with some washi and then cut it out, and then use some black foam to pop up that boo right in the center of the house. And it just looks so fun, even though the silver almost looks whitish in certain lights. I think it looks great with those two ghosts and all the little characters on that background. This is the ghost shaker dies. I didn't use it in this video, but I will be using it in a video on Pretty Pink Posh's YouTube channel, so stay tuned for that. I hope you can tell that I had a blast with this new release, but I'd love to hear if something caught your eye. Let me know in the comments below. I have an entire fall/Halloween playlist, and I'm gonna link to that here if you wanna check out some other videos. As always, I wanna thank you so much for stopping by and spending time with me today. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon. Be sure to share those new supplies. Share. Okay. I wanna say share. Thing that is involved in. Too many words. That's it. Okay, stop.